everybody. So welcome to part 2 of how to store your dahlias. If you haven't seen part 1, check that out. I will put a link below and you can check that out. It's a quick 5-minute video to give you a little bit of information for how to get where we're at right now. As you can see, I dug up a dahlia today. I'm not actually digging all my dahlias because we haven't had a frost yet, which is great. But I know a lot of you have, and I know some of you have even had snow, and I'm really sorry about that. That would make me very sad. So I'm going to walk you through the process today. So the first thing I want to say about this whole thing is that, like a lot of things in gardening, there are multiple ways to do this. There's rarely a lot of absolutes in gardening. So you might have, first of all, if you have a different way to store dahlias that works for you, I mean, keep doing it. There is not one specific way to do this. And the reason I haven't made a video before is because I wanted to try out a lot of different ways and I wasn't confident in what I was doing. So now the system that I'm going to be showing you, the techniques I'm going to be showing you today are actually something I've been doing for the last 3 years or so, and I've had really good success with it, and I feel comfortable sharing that. But I've tried a lot of different things that haven't worked for me, and a couple that have worked for me but that are really time consuming. So, you know, go with what you like, and if you skip a couple of steps in this or you do something a little differently, it's probably going to work. This is not as complicated as it's set out to be. So the first thing you need to know is when you're storing your dahlias, the thing that is like the make or break thing is all about humidity. So you need enough humidity to keep those bulbs plump and hydrated, but too much humidity and they rot. So that's where it gets tricky. So I personally have lost an entire collection of dahlias. I stored them in peat moss one year and I never checked on them. I closed them up, I walked away, I never checked on them. And it turns out that peat moss sucked all the moisture out of them. So by the time I pulled them out in spring, they were these desiccated, they were just dust, basically. I lost every single one of them. So that didn't work for me. I've also had dahlia tubers rot before. So there's a lot of different ways. I'm gonna mention a couple of them right now, and then I'm gonna show you what I do. So first of all, there is something where you can actually divide your tubers now in fall. You can dip them in a very weak bleach solution and then you wrap them individually in saran wrap. I did it, it worked great. But I don't like to divide, first of all, and you have to divide them. You have to divide them. There's no not dividing them involved in that method because you have to have an individual tuber because you don't want two tubers touching each other. If you want to try that method, just Google it, you'll find it. I found it on a Dahlia website. I think it was even like a Dahlia club or a Dahlia organization website. It's really meant for people who are going to be sharing their dahlias or selling their dahlia tubers. So that one works for sure. Other people will just let the dirt sort of stay on them, throw them in a plastic bag but not close them, put them in a cooler spot and go with that. That has not worked great for me, but you can try it. And there's all sorts of different things that you can store your dahlias in. Now, my favorite thing is to use, and I'll show you those in a second here, is wood shavings, animal bedding. You can go buy a big thing of animal bedding. I actually had a friend reach out to me whose husband does a whole bunch of woodworking. She said, if you ever need wood shavings, come to my house. We have them. So you can do that, whatever. But some people told me they like storing in vermiculite, which sounds like a great idea to me. I don't particularly care for storing in peat moss because of that situation that I explained to you. So some people just wrap them in newspaper. There's a lot of ways to do this, and I'm not saying that mine is the best way. I'm just telling you this is what works for me. So let's just get on with it, right? Okay, so we've dug our dahlia tuber. We've already labeled it. We've dug it. The best way to dig it is I use a fork. Make sure, a big garden fork, make sure that you stay far enough away from the root ball because if you spear a dahlia, it's done. You're gonna have to cut that tuber out. There's no saving that. So you cannot have a damaged tuber in there. Next thing so I've got that here. I did not cut these stems back. You can do that before, you can do it after, but we're gonna cut these down to like maybe 4 inches, between 4 and 6 inches on these. But the first thing I'm gonna do is I am gonna rinse this tuber off so that I can see what's all going on in here. And that will give us a much better idea. Again, some people don't do this step. I like to know that all my tubers are in good shape. There's no rot in any of them, and there's nothing, because sometimes rot can kind of spread when you store tubers. So it's better to get that out of there before you store them. So first off is rinsing. Okay, so now you've rinsed off your tubers and you've cut your stems 4 to 6 inches long, and you've got them labeled. So you're doing good there. So the next thing you need to do is just look over all your tubers and make sure there are no damaged tubers in there. If there are any that you've speared with a fork or you have any kind of damage, just cut those out right away. They won't store, so you're not losing anything, and you don't want to take any chances of introducing rot to the rest of the clump of dahlias here. There are 2 ways to deal with your dahlias. You can divide them in fall, or you can divide them in spring. I actually prefer to divide them in spring because it's easier to see the eyes, which is what you need to know to know where to cut. And sometimes I don't actually want to divide my dahlias. You don't have to divide them all the time. Sometimes you want a bigger clump. So I prefer to do that in spring. And I actually did a video last spring when I potted them up, showing you how to do that. So I'll put a link to that too, in case you decide that you do want to divide them. Sometimes it saves a little bit of room in fall, so that would be the main reason to do it in fall. Or if you're trying to share with people ahead of time, things like that. Okay, so now you've rinsed them off, you've cleaned them up, you've decided whether you're going to divide them or not, although dividing would happen after this next step. Next thing you have to do, no matter what, is dry them off. I leave mine in my basement, just set in a cardboard box or on a rack to dry off, and you want these to be thoroughly dry before you store them. So that could be a week, it could be up to 3 weeks, but it's definitely going to be several days before these are fully dry. So that is the next step in the process. So I store my dahlias in these collapsible plastic crates that have the ventilation, but you don't have to do that. You can store them in milk crates or cardboard boxes, whatever works for you. Just don't make it a solid plastic thing. And the next thing I do is I line the sides and the bottom with newspaper. So the newspaper, most importantly, keeps your, whatever you're using as your storage medium, keeps that from going everywhere. But it also helps kind of control the humidity a little bit as well. Okay, so these are the wood shavings that I use in there. Like I said, you can do whatever you like. I put those in, so I put a good layer on the bottom. And then what I start doing is I start layering my dahlia tubers in there. And I will just nestle them in. I'll make sure that none are touching, none of the clumps are touching, but I just sort of nestle them in and fill in the wood shavings around them. Okay, so now you've dug your dahlias, you've labeled them, you've rinsed them off, you've let them dry, you've divided them if you're going to do that in fall, or you're going to wait till spring and decide if you want to do it then. You've got them nestled in whatever bedding they're going to be in, but now you have to put all of that somewhere. So where do you put that? Well, it needs to be about 40 to 50 degrees. You can fudge it a little bit on either side of that, but not a lot. If you get cold, if they freeze, they're done. They turn to mush. So freezing dahlia tubers, no good. If it gets too hot, they'll probably desiccate and dry out. So you got to find a spot like that. For me, I put this in the farthest corner of my basement, right up against an outer wall, which tends to stay right around 50 or a little bit below. Sorry, dogs. You'll have to find the right spot for you, and you might have to play around with it a little bit, but don't be afraid to ask a friend if they'll store some dahlias for you if they have a spot that works for that. Then the next thing you want to do is check on that humidity maybe once a month. So last year I actually checked on my dahlias once a month and felt like the storage medium was getting really dry, and I spritzed that storage medium probably 2 or 3 times. One of the things I'm going to try this year is stacking up my crates inside of a big contractor's garbage bag and leaving that at the bottom to begin with. But as the winter goes on, as things get a little drier, I might pull that up. I won't seal it, but I might pull that up to help keep a little bit of the moisture a little bit more consistent in there. And the other thing is that if you stack several crates, don't just check the top one. You might have to rearrange them a little bit. It's a little bit of fussing, but it's winter, and what else do you have to do anyways, right? It's kind of gardening, so go with it. So once you get them all stored, check on them. I like to pop mine up ahead of time in about mid-April, which is when I do my dividing. There is a video from last year on that. You can revisit that anytime you want, or come back in April and check it out then. But otherwise, give it a try, you guys. You have nothing to lose. If it doesn't work, yeah, hey, that's a new opportunity to buy more dahlias. If it does work, think about all the dahlias you're going to have. In my case, way too many. So good luck with that. Give it a try this winter, and I hope you keep watching some gardening videos and we can continue gardening together. I always love to hear from you guys and hear what's going on in your garden.